the details. So we're going to chant this mantra here. Can you guys see that? Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahe Tejasvina Adi Tamastu Ma Vidvashavahe. So this is a mantra that's often chanted in the beginning of study. It's got the translations there. One of the translations that this doesn't have is, may we all join together in the studies to uplift our consciousness. And one thing that one of my teachers translates it, may there be no bickering between any of us, no bickering between the student and the teachers. So I always like that translation. So we'll chant this all together. If you could mute yourselves. So Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Adi Tamastu Ma Vidvashavahay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, Yoga Sutras. I'm going to do a little intro to the Yoga Sutras here before we actually get into the text itself. So most of you I know are somewhat familiar with Yoga Sutras, maybe quite a bit familiar with it. And where to start? So yoga has primary text associated with it. And this is something that I kind of like to almost be borderline antagonistic about, because these are some facts that the yoga community has sort of been sleeping on. It's almost a form of yoga denialism. And some people in the yoga community know this, but a lot of people don't know these kinds of things. And it's something that every yoga teacher in America should be completely aware of the fact that the two primary texts on yoga are the Bhagavad Gita and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That's just how it goes. Now, it gets complicated here, though, because this is what we call Yoga Darshana. So Darshana is often translated as philosophy. And philosophy is okay, but it's a little bit, it misses a lot of the juice that we're dealing with what Darshana means. Darshana means the sight of the divine, or a divine realization. So it's, when we're talking about a darshan, when you go see a guru, like if you go see Amma, the hugging guru, you're getting darshan. You're getting the sight of the divine being. So yoga darshana is becoming in contact with, you're getting the sight of that which is yoga, the darshana, the sight of. In classical Indian philosophy, there's 6 darshanas. Samkhya is considered to be, by most people, now this is where we get a little bit controversial. What's old, what's oldest, and how old? So a lot of people spend a lot of time on this, and nobody knows. And anybody who tells you that they do know is misleading you. We have prominent opinions that people have, but they're all just opinions. And as what the study of the Yoga Sutras is really about is the spiritual truth that's contained in the Yoga Sutras. It's not about having to be able to locate the time or the century from which it came from. Now, that being said, there's 2 prominent schools. A lot of the Indian crowd, particularly when you're hanging out with swamis and whatnot, people in the Vedanta Society, my Kriya Yoga teachers, they follow the classical view, which is the Yoga Sutras predate the Bhagavad Gita, and they're arguably older than the Vedas. They've been an oral tradition for quite some time. In the Western world today, And somewhat in coming out of India, there is an opinion that the Yoga Sutras came after Buddha, that they were after Buddha. Now, a lot of people have a lot of skin in this game, particularly academics who have a bias towards the supremacy of the Buddhist worldview. They don't want yoga to have, they don't want the Hindus to have a stronghold on it. And I find it quite disingenuous when people are trying to say that the Yoga Sutras come after Buddha, period. Because the truth is that there's various views on the topic, and nobody has definitive evidence. But I do know that those who are really advocating for it being predating it, they're wanting it to have more of a Hindu leaning, and those predating Buddha. And the ones who want it after Buddha tend to often have the bias towards Buddha, like that the teachings were somehow influenced by Buddha. Now, like I was saying, this ultimately doesn't matter, because the thing is how do the Yoga Sutras transform your life? How do they enrich your life is what's really important, and the time period is not so important. Now, I don't have the numbers memorized off of the top of my head, but I will admit my bias in that most of the Yoga Sutra people that I've studied with feel that the Yoga Sutras are as old as the Vedas, but were not written down until quite some time afterwards. Now, the Vedas are pretty unanimously agreed upon to be they're like the oldest written text that we know of. Super, super, super old. Nobody really bickers about that one too much. Everybody wants to get it on the yoga, you know? Okay, so the important points here is yoga is a darshana. So the darshana is like a path to enlightenment in and of itself. The 6 darshanas, Samkhya means cosmic enumeration like counting. Next class, we'll probably get into a little bit of Sankhya, because when you get into the popular second verse of the Yoga Sutras, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, it's referring to terms that are very relevant to Samkhya. So we'll dance around with that a little bit next week. Today, I knew I was going to spend a little bit of time on these introductory topics, and we will touch on the first 2 verses, time willing. So the Yoga Sutras are Darshana, Samkhya, Vedanta. Vedanta is another one of the darshanas. So some of us are aware of the Vedanta Society, which comes off of Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. But the Vedanta Society is also like a whole system yoga philosophy, not so much into the yoga asana, but they get into bhakti, karma, jnana, and raja yoga quite actively. The other Nyaya is the school of logic. And then, to be honest, I'm forgetting the other 2 schools. There's 6 schools altogether. They're called the Shat Darshanas, the 6 classical schools of Indian philosophy. Most people do not study the names that I'm forgetting. A lot of people study Vedanta, and a lot of people are Yoga Vedanta, like Swami Shivananda, Yogananda. They are all under the influence of Yoga Vedanta. Swami Kripalu, Yoga Vedanta. Shivananda, and there's all the different Shivananda offshoots. So most any of the Anandas that we've heard of that are teaching yoga, it's Yoga Vedanta hybrid. Most of them are not pure yoga, just yoga alone. Now, when you get into Krishnamacharya and those teachers, they tend to not go into the Vedanta so much. They get a little bit more into yoga and then Hatha yoga. So Hatha yoga is also a hotly argued, hotly contentious of how old is Hatha yoga. And it's another one of those things that, does it really make a difference with how yoga impacts you in your daily life and how you feel? So my teacher, Dr. Raju, said, do you want to argue about how old the texts are, or do you want to experience the nectar that comes from the text? And it really does come down to that at some point. I've seen some people fall off of their yoga practice because they get so upset about the timelines of these things. So it is interesting. It's an interesting thing to explore, but we always want to remember that we're putting these scriptural teachings are to fuel our practice, not to fuel our speculation about the past. Yoga, Vedanta, Samkhya, Krishnamacharya schools. There is not so much teaching from the Upanishads and the other secondary yoga texts like you find in these other schools that are Yoga Vedanta schools. Now, a lot of us will tend to be drawn to Yoga Vedanta schools because in the Yoga Vedanta schools, there's often conversation or chit chat about oneness, this oneness. And Vedanta is staunchly monotheistic. Everything is God. Everything is God. All is one. Yoga is a dualistic school where there is a separation. So there's a big difference actually between Vedanta and yoga in regards to dualism versus non-dualism. And so the yoga text is often considered a psychological manual of how to deal with your life and how to go deeper into meditation. There's 4 chapters. The Samadhi Pada. Pada can loosely be translated as chapter. It's a different word, but pada implies like length. It's like the length of a certain, like the book is so big, they call them a pada. So Samadhi Pada, which is about the states of meditation, states that we experience in meditation. The second book, which is the most studied book, a lot of yoga teachers get exposure to it, is the Sadhana Pada, the chapter on spiritual practice. Sadhana Pada. The third chapter is the kind of far out cosmic chapter where they talk about mystical powers. And the fourth chapter is the Kaivalya Pada, where they talk about the final liberation. So I'm forgetting how many verses are all together. I'm challenging myself and trying to not use my notes because I was cheating on my notes. So there's 4 books. The second book is most prominent. The first and second book are the most understandable. The third chapter gets a little esoteric, and the fourth chapter is actually fairly understandable as well. The fourth pada. Although the states that are expressed in the fourth pada are for very advanced meditators. During the time of Swami Vivekananda, called the Yoga Sutras Raja Yoga. So I don't have my copy of it here, but there's a book that's called Raja Yoga, and it's got a couple chapters before Swami Vivekananda's translation and commentary on the Yoga Sutras. Raja Yoga is a great read, the whole book. It's a little, Swami Vivekananda's language, it's from the late 1800s, so it's a little challenging for some people, but the Yoga Sutras are generally challenging. Generally, people who get into Yoga Sutras are not afraid of learning, like we often find in the yoga community. Like I'm picking on the yoga community, but do we really want to actually learn about the tradition? And the Yoga Sutras give us a lot to chew on and a lot to learn. So I wanted to say something about the traditional commentaries of the Yoga Sutras. Nowadays, there is a lot of what I'm calling poetic renderings of the Yoga Sutras, and they're good. And I don't mean to be like really negative and overly criticize them, because people can draw inspiration from them, or they can feel connected to this modern way of approaching the Yoga Sutras. The only problem comes in that the Yoga Sutras are a rigorous grammatical study. It's not just like, oh, I feel like it says this and I like it. It's like there's this rigorous Sanskrit that's been going on for thousands of years. And so now on the other side of the thing, well, I don't want to like criticize some of these poetic renderings. When we talk about yoga and cultural misappropriation, we need to be careful, because the Yoga Sutras is this long-standing tradition, and there's primary commentaries. So basically, like if you want to go to medical school, if you want to be a surgeon, you need to go and you study with a surgeon. Like, you can't just be like, well, I'm going to do open heart surgery tomorrow, right? That makes sense to all of us. We all know that. But for some reason, when it comes to like reading these texts, it sort of becomes a little bit of a free-for-all where people are like, well, I can just make it whatever I want. And I'm following my spiritual truth. I'm following my heart. I'm following my luminosity, you know? It's like all of that, like self-aggrandizing, spiritual narcissism, which is super like common in our yoga community, all very shows up with the way that we are approaching this text. So while most of these poetic renderings are good and like, you know, but some of them really miss the whole thing. So I don't mean to be like overly critical of people's hard work that they've put into these kind of more like modern translations, but the fact of the matter is sutra study is a long-standing thing that's been going on for thousands of years. It has rigorous Sanskrit involved. You don't need to be a Sanskrit scholar to be able to study it because people write it all down and you can just kind of read it and pick it up. But we do need to be respectful that this tradition does come out of the primary commentary, which was done by Sage Vyasa. And now the Sage Vyasa thing goes back again to how old they are. So assuming that Sage Vyasa did do this commentary, that makes it quite old. So I hope this isn't going whoop too much on people. So let's take a little break here. Does anybody have any questions at this moment? Any thoughts that you wanted to share as well?
Not yet. I'm just gonna, you know, like I had told you, I'm gonna drop off a little early, so I'm hoping you will have the recording, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Here's the notes that I was trying to not cheat on. Nyaya, these are the 6 classical schools of Indian philosophy. So now if somebody, you know, like the whole thing, it's like yoga is not a religion. So yeah, yoga is not a religion. Yoga it's a darshana. I dropped the A there. Darshan is often someone's name. I don't know if anybody has. Do you have a friend named Darshan? I have a few friends named Darshan, both Indians and Westerners. But so yoga is a yoga philosophy, or it's a lifestyle practice, which often looks Hindu or can become Hindu, but it can also be Buddhist. It can also become Sikh in origin. It's a little controversial, but we're not going to get into unpacking that right now. It can also, there's a lot of historically atheists have been into the practice of yoga, even though the yoga philosophy is specifically theistic. So I think a couple of hard facts about yoga is, one, it's theistic, so it believes in a god. There is a god. And 2, and my brain's like a sieve. Yeah, so I forgot what my second one was going to be. I was ready to like make a big statement and I forgot what I was going to say. So, oh yeah, it's a philosophy. It's not a religion, it's a philosophy. So those are 2 facts about yoga. Yoga is a philosophy, it's a practice, and it's theistic. So like we can just end the controversy there. Pachink. So Vaishishika, Mamimsa, Samkhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. And now this slide here has all of the different, I says Maharishi, or you could say the sage. So each one of these individuals either wrote down or shared this teaching, and all of these teachings were considered to be self-revealed knowledge. So in the Vedic view, these are considered to all be valid paths of enlightenment that are like omnipresent in the consciousness, in the akasha, as they call it. So as through different times in creation, these ideas will re-enter into the collective consciousness. So it's not that somebody created the yoga philosophy, it's that the yoga philosophy was revealed. Kind of like you see a tree, or you see a lake, or you see a room. These people saw the truth that is yoga. So this was this thing of what the darshana is, the sight, the seeing it directly, seeing that enlightened state. And so like I was saying earlier, Samkhya is very important to at least learn the basics. Now, I don't know, I mean, I know people, I know some swamis that I've studied with who know a lot about Samkhya, but generally like people don't read the Samkhya sutras a whole lot. A lot of people don't study him too in depth, but the like foundations of Samkhya are very important for Ayurveda study and for Yoga Sutra study. It's very important in Ayurveda. Ayurveda expands it even more. Now, Nyaya is very important in the Bhakti schools because the form of logic that they use creates the conclusions that they come to in the Bhakti schools. Now, I can't expound upon that in great detail, but Nyaya is basically a form of empirical gathering of information. Yoga is a system of uniting the individual self with the infinite self. Vedanta is the non-dual system of waking up to our eternal consciousness of truth, consciousness, and bliss, absolute. Waking up completely. Within Vedanta, there's lots of different means, from bhakti into jnana yoga, and a lot that can be said about that. I know a little bit about Vedanta. I am empowered to teach through a Vedanta line for some weird reason, but I'm not a Vedanta expert. I know a lot more about the Yoga Sutras and Ayurveda. So I've been rambling about this. So how old is yoga? Many people feel yoga is the most ancient of the 6 philosophies. Some people argue if Samkhya or yoga are older, but when they were written down is another thing. This is what my teachers' opinions are, which are mostly Indians who are highly respected scholars. So they think that it predated the Puranic time period. So the Puranic time period is when they wrote the Bhagavad Gita and a lot of the Mahabharata and all of the big yoga, the big Hindu texts like the Devi Mahatmya, the Navaratri, we just heard all about that with 9 Nights of Mother. So all of those texts that came out the Puranic time period. So they're saying yoga's older than that. And there's a lot of really good evidence for that. It's not just a whimsical claim. So yoga definitely predates Patanjali. Patanjali, who's the author of the Yoga Sutras, is considered to be the compiler of the Yoga Sutras. So he was the compiler. He took a lot of people were having this yogic experience, and then he was the one who wrote it down and said, here is a text that we can study. So, and like I said, there's a lot of scholarly debate on this, and I'm sharing most all of my teachers all have the same view on this because I'm swimming in a certain pool of teachers. So what is a sutra? So the word sutra and suture, like when you get stitched at the hospital, suture, are grammatically connected through the Indo-European language of Sanskrit. They share the same preface, suture and sutra. So it means to thread together. So sutras are specifically short, concise statements that hold a whole lot of potency, which is why I was talking about why the grammar in the Sanskrit is so important. You can't understand it unless you know the grammar and the Sanskrit. So the grammar is like a key to unlock the teaching, and then they wanted to have them very easy to chant so that people could memorize them. So that's part of the thing. They make the sutra gets condensed, and it's this easy form of chanting. So sutra is like, you think about like a mala, like the beads. So the sutra is like the string, and then you put all the beads along it. So each sutra is considered like a bead on a necklace that would create a whole necklace. So when I say the heavy guru, I had an earlier slide. The word guru has many meanings, and one of them means heavy. So in Ayurveda, it's like one of the qualities, heavy. There's a joke amongst some people that if your guru is not fat, you shouldn't trust them because they need to have heavy duty knowledge, like really heavy. So it actually means just like heavy. Like the word guru would mean heavy, like, oh, I can't pick that weight up because it's too guru. So it's really quite funny because all of these words have many meanings. Like yoga, the word yoga has 34 meanings. So one of the great things that I really like about the Yoga Sutras is that they can meet a new practitioner or an incredibly advanced practitioner. It can explain the profound experience in meditation for somebody who sat down to meditate for the first time and was like, wow. or it can explain the highest state of the most enlightened person on the planet. And everybody in between. It's quite profound. Now, I like the Yoga Sutras, so just bear with me and my over enthusiasm. So there's other major sutras. There's the Yoga Sutras, like we've been talking about, Brahma Sutras, which are also called the Vedanta Sutras. The Vedanta Sutras, I tried to read them with my teacher. So Mataji at Mother's Trust, she had this whole thing that I'm born to become a Brahmanishtaha. She was like, that's part of my thing. So then my teacher, Dr. Raju, he felt like I should study the Brahma Sutras because of this. So I started reading the Brahma Sutras, and oh my gosh, it's totally not my thing. They're so dry. And if I was, if I had a lot of free time, I think I would get into it. But basically, you're picking apart the Upanishads, and then you're trying to prove your theological stance based upon the Upanishads. There's a lot of different theological views that come out of the Brahma Sutras or the Vedanta Sutras, and every Vedanta school has to prove their theology through the Brahma Sutras. So every Vedanta school, so the Hare Krishnas are a Vedanta school. So to become a bona fide legit school, they had to take the Brahma Sutras and they needed to prove their theological view through the Brahma Sutras. So it's very argumentative. It's very, very detailed. When you read one sutra, you then have to get out the Upanishads and read like a whole ton of Upanishads. And like I said, it's not that it wasn't my thing. It's that I just don't, if I lived like in a monastery, I think, or like if I lived like on welfare or something like that, like, I would really get into it, but I just didn't have time for it. It's very Indian cultural centric, which is good, but a little bit challenging for me because I wasn't born and raised in India, but it's quite fascinating. Now, the Bhakti Sutras of Sage Narada are excellent. They're more accessible, like the Yoga Sutras are. And I do plan to get into the Bhakti Sutras once we get done with the Yoga Sutras. There's also, like I said, there's the Sankhya Sutras. There's the Kama Sutra, not karma. Kama means pleasure, and the Kama Sutra is an ancient book on sexual pleasures. So there's lots of sutras. And then within Buddhism, there's a whole nother world of sutras, and everything I'm saying about this stuff does not apply. So Buddhist sutras are a different method of study, a different approach to study, and I am not educated in those, but other people are. So, Sage Patanjali, like I've been saying, the date of his birth and death are unknown. They do know that Patanjali was also a Sanskrit scholar and an Ayurvedic practitioner, an Ayurvedic doctor, I should really say. And he wrote things on Ayurveda. His name means a handful of oblations offered to God. And some of you may have noticed my daughter's name is Anjali. And Anjali means divine offering. Sometimes in yoga, we'll say Anjali Mudra, joining the hands together. So Patanjali is a handful of offerings to God. So Anjali is a divine offering, offerings to God. Patanjali is a handful of offerings to God. So yeah, he's very well known for his Sanskrit grammar and Ayurveda commentaries. And as I was saying, it's believed that Sage Vyasa wrote commentaries on the Yoga Sutras. And Sage Vyasa is the one who wrote all of the Puranas in the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata. So this is where it gets contentious. Some scholars say, no, that's some other guy named Vyasa. Or some other people say, no, the Hindus just made that up. They wanted it to be Vyasa. And so it gets contentious. So reviewing some of the things I said earlier, now that I got out the slides, Samadhi Pada, Sadhana Pada, Vibhuti Pada, and Kaivalya Pada. So Samadhi Pada is the book on Samadhi, or super conscious meditation, we could say, self-realization. Sadhana Pada is about spiritual practice. Vibhuti Pada is about yogic powers. And then the Kaivalya Pada is all about the final liberation. So we'll be going over these things slowly for those of you who stick with me or those of you who come and go. So this quote here is from Paramahamsa Pragyananda's commentary on the Yoga Sutras. And any of these quotes that don't say who it is, it's from him. I've taken the most from his commentary. His commentary is my favorite next to Baba Haridas's. Baba Hari, Haridas. Baba Haridas's these are based on the traditional commentaries that have been going on in Indian culture for thousands of years. Now we have a lot of well-intended Western academics that are creating a new method of looking at the Yoga Sutras. But I prefer to stick with the traditional commentators. Shanti, were you going to ask a question or say something?
Yeah, who did you say, if you have something that's from who? Vivekananda or I missed?
Pragyanananda for Kriya Yoga International. He's the guru in Kriya Yoga International. You're doing a kirtan at their center, I believe.
Okay, got it. It's the Kriya Yoga. Okay.
Yeah, those books are a little hard to get, but if you're at the ashram, you can get them, or if you go to their website, they don't sell them on Amazon or anything like that. They're very good. They're very in-depth, and he does a lot of word-by-word breakdown, and so does Baba Haridas of the Sanskrit etymology. We already kind of went over all this. So the thing I keep trying to bring up is I'm trying to bring up all of the controversy about the Yoga Sutras. But I'm also trying to say an ounce of practice is worth tons of theories, right? So it's interesting when we get into like yoga, you guys are all fairly, I don't think any of you are totally new to the Yoga Sutras. Linda, I'm not sure about you, but you know, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, yoga is about the cessation of thought waves, right? So now I practice anatomically based, yoga therapy based. I assess people's spines. I check pelvic alignment. I palpate muscles. It's a lot of thought waves, right? I'm having fun in my thought waves, but I'm not mistaking that for being yoga in its truest sense. Yoga in its truest sense is the cessation of mental activity where you see reality directly as it is. So when we start to get anchored more deeply in the yogic state, we can be active and have all these thought waves, but be anchored deeper back and in. All right. We technically have 12 minutes. Atta yoganushashanam. Atta yoganushashanam. Atta yoganushashanam. This is the first sutra of the Yoga Sutras. Ataha. Ataha means now. So the first word of the Yoga Sutras is my teacher, Dr. Raju, would say is a terminal statement. It's the complete teaching of the whole Yoga Sutras, which is now. Because everything is right now. Ataha also means like auspicious beginnings. So it's a blessing. Sometimes it's used, a text either starts with Om or Ataha. Ataha. So if you are a master of the present moment, when you hear now, you're already there. You don't need to study the Yoga Sutras. You don't probably even need a sadhana anymore, right? Thou hath arrived. Ataha, now. So it means to remember God and to invoke auspiciousness as well. Ataha. Invoking auspiciousness. It's an auspicious present moment. We're invoking that auspiciousness of the here and the now. My father-in-law passed away 2 or 3 weeks ago now. And like that, like hit me really deeply into the present moment. A little morbid on my part, but when someone dies, it's almost like a drug. I'm like, how do I get back to that freshness? Like when that aliveness that you feel when someone else dies, And this is really like the spiritual state, the spiritual experience of being fully in the present moment. So this is a whole lot of yeah, so as I was saying, a lot of texts begin with ataha, atta bhakti vakyasyama. Now we will explain and examine divine love or devotion, is the Bhakti Sutras. Ataha Brahma Jinjanasa. Then, therefore, the question of Brahman, the absolute. So from the Brahma Sutras. So both of those sutras both start with the word ataha as well. So the word ataha has 6 meanings. For brevity, I don't think we'll go over them all right now. And the second word in the Yoga Sutras is yoga. Yoga. I was listening. Does anybody here ever listen to Swami Sarvapriyananda? Are you guys familiar with him? He's a Vedanta Society Swami. He's like a bit of a YouTube sensation. He's one of the big time Swamis on YouTube. He's like a scholar, just like crazy. But he was making a joke about like really the word is yoga. In Hindi, they say yog. In a lot of the Indian languages, they say yog. In America, we say yoga. It's yoga with like an aspirated H at the end. So, like I was saying, there's 34, 35 meanings of the word yoga. Some of them relate to more just mundane things. But usually when we use the yoga in the spiritual context, we're referring to things yoking or joining together. There's specific definitions of yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, which would be useful for me to break out right here. I think I don't remember how many there are, but yoga is defined multiple times in the Bhagavad Gita. But yoga and samadhi are considered to be synonyms, interchangeable. So super consciousness is yoga and yoga is super consciousness. Super consciousness bliss is yoga and yoga is super conscious bliss. So when you touch an elephant, you're in contact with the whole elephant, right? I'm touching a table right now. By touching one part of the table, I'm in contact with the whole table. So any authentic, not to be that guy, I'm gonna be that guy. Any kind of authentic yoga practice that's time tested and has produced masters of samadhi, those practices are a reflection of the state itself. So the practice is non-different than the state. So all of the major branches of yoga, and I think you guys are all kind of familiar with this, but like bhakti, the yoga of devotion, karma yoga, the yoga of service, jnana yoga, the yoga of self-inquiry and study, knowing thyself. Hatha yoga, movement of the body, purification of the energy channels, which leads us into meditative states. So you touch the hatha yoga in the right way, you're touching the enlightened state. Breath observation. You touch that breath observation and you're touching the full experience. You come in contact with it. So then we just are deepening our awareness of that state. We don't have time for all this tonight. That's okay. One of my things with this class is we're just gonna like get through it as we get through it. Sometimes I'll like I gotta get all this information in. So there's
Um,
already been a lot of information tonight. Are you bowing out, Shanti? Good.
yeah, I'll be back next week. Cheers.
Namaste.
Thank you. Bye.
So does anyone have any thoughts or want to ask any questions, share anything here?
This might be way too big a question, but I'm curious about how people who are teaching Yoga Vedanta reconcile that dual non-dual difference.
Right. The thing I've heard people say is that yoga is like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the Bhagavad Gita are all a manual. Those are the methods, upasanas. So you've probably heard this before, but there's this like, oh, it's just like such a hard teaching. The qualifications of a seeker. I don't have them all memorized, but when you get into the really like top end monastic jnana yoga, there's all these things that you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be completely detached. Like you're supposed to have you're beyond your cravings. You're supposed to like have embodied complete humility. So there's all these like personality traits that you're supposed to develop. And they're like, and then when you have them, and then you ask, who am I? You then have realization. You have realization like instantly. So they put a lot of emphasis on like character development, and they view all of these yoga paths as upasanas or methods to help you with overall character development and to help you get ready for that quick split where you can wake up to the ultimate reality. So for them, it's a little bit of like a hierarchy where the person who has a purified heart and a purified intellect will just naturally become self-realized. And then for the rest of us, we're kind of schlepping through doing meditation, doing yoga poses, doing mantras. And they're like, ultimately, all those things, like, they're all just part of the undifferentiated consciousness from that. So they've got this like really lofty overview of it. Did that help?
Yeah, it really does. And that's, I think, what I appreciate most about your teaching style is just the very pragmatic laying it out. Like, yeah, here's what it is, and here's where we are. So thank you.
Thank you. So there's something I was going to say. I think it slipped away again. I'm really sleep deprived. I've got this toddler thing going on. But it's okay. It's kind of like being a stoner. It's like, oh, I forgot. But just a sleep deprived dad. So the within the more like say the Vedanta Society, like Vivekananda and that whole line, it gets complicated with Vedanta Society because Ramakrishna and Vivekananda were two different people that kind of had a different. Vivekananda was teaching what he learned from Ramakrishna, but Ramakrishna presented things very differently. And he never wrote anything down. It was all stories about him, but different people would focus on his life in different ways. And he was a wild, wild bhakta. Ramakrishna just was like completely ecstatic, crying, dancing, ecstatic kirtans quite a bit. Vivekananda was more of a scholar. He was an atheist when he met Ramakrishna. But within the Vedanta Society specifically, and the teachings of Ramakrishna, they are always saying, bhakti is really, they put a lot of emphasis on bhakti being easy, accessible, and important for most people, where Raja Yoga or meditation tends to be a little bit more challenging. But then like Ramakrishna Vivekananda and Swami Shivananda, all of them have this thing of the hybridization of the schools. And each individual will, throughout their life, and as an individual, will have more or less attraction to bhakti, karma, jnana, meditation, or Raja Yoga, as a lot of people call it. So we're all kind of like sifting through whatever we need and doing whatever, or a lot of us are very much so engaged in extroverted lifestyle, which is very much so, karma yoga is the best and bhakti yoga are the best. Like if you have a full-time job, you're doing bhakti and karma. I mean, that's the only way out in that situation. You're not going to be doing 3 hours of meditation a day. It's just, okay, I'm rambling. So. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions or thoughts?
Not right now. Took some notes and just kind of taking some stuff in. I appreciate going into your viewpoint, you know what I mean? Something to think about that classical perspective. Because I think I've kind of the little teeny bit that I've even like touched is I think through this Western perspective. But so I'm just excited to learn more.
Chime on. Yeah, it's interesting for me with the Western perspective versus more of like what the Indians are teaching, because I've been swimming in, a lot of my teachers are Indians or they've studied with Indians. Like you guys have met Swami Shankarananda. He's a, white American guy, but he's in the Indian pool. Like, you know, I've been, I interface with a lot of people that have gotten under the influence of the Western academic stuff. And so I'm trying to be respectful to all of them, but I do feel a little bit disappointed with the Western academics and that they do not a lot of them have not studied the Indian tradition, and then they're trying to reframe it. Which I find a bit, I have a hard time with it. Like I get it, my fangs come out a little bit. I'm sort of like, okay, well, I know that there's a pressure in academia to have the hot new finding, or to like have the new research. But I don't think Indianology, like if you look at what the Indians have to say about Indianology and about American Sanskrit studies and stuff like that, they're just like, you guys could please burn all that down. India has an incredible academic tradition that's very rigorous, and the Western academics are just sort of like, they pay no, like these people that are like extreme PhDs, highest level, like they just don't know. Almost, some of them know some of it, but like a lot of them don't know anything about the Indian tradition. So it's just a little weird. But the cool thing is right now we have, there's still a lot of some of the bigger yoga schools, like the Shivananda schools and things like that, where all of this stuff is very accessible still for those who are wanting to explore it. I'll probably feel bad about saying this later on, I'm sure. I'm like I say really controversial things and I feel bad about it later on. Eventually I'll get over it. I did have my original software musicians was off. I turned it on because I was on another Zoom meeting right before this one. So I didn't reactivate it.
And I too just wanted to say thank you. I'm definitely new to this. I mean, I know a little bit, but very little. So this was really great to give it's like setting the stage. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We had Alicia there for a little bit and then she was gone, but I know she's studied this kind of stuff quite a bit. She's a good friend, but all right, so let's we can mute ourselves and we'll just do some closing mantras. I might be able to put them up on a screen for you guys. I can. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityur Ma Mritam Gamaya Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityur Ma Mritam Gamaya Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya mrityurmamritam gamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May we be led from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from the fear of death to knowledge of immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. May all beings in all dimensions, times, places be happy and free. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaste.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing. You guys can go if you want to, but
No.
all yoga is good yoga. And my teachers who are like way more serious scholars, yoga scholars than me, my teacher is Swami Atmavidyananda. he, whenever any kinds of yoga comes up, like somebody starts talking about, like hot yoga, blah, 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 like all this kind of stuff, like music with techno, he'll always be, all yoga is good yoga. And like all study of Yoga Sutras is good study of Yoga Sutras, So it's like everyone is doing wherever they're drawn to. And at the same time, we got to acknowledge that there's a tradition to studying these texts. But yes, but all yoga is good yoga. So yeah, I'm trying to get to focusing on that. So with that, so maybe we'll see you guys next week. And if
Great.
not, we'll see you when it's good for you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.